Welcome to the Marc Steiner Show here on The Real News. It's good to have you all with us as we continue to cover Palestine and Israel and hear from people throughout that struggle, and continue our series, Not in Our Name, Jewish Voices that oppose the occupation of Palestine and the oppression and repression of Palestinians by Israelis. On March 24th, co-director of the film No Other Land, Hamdan Ballal, was attacked by Israeli settlers and was badly injured. And while in the ambulance, he was attacked again. The Israeli police took him to an unknown location, and following an international outcry, he was released the next day. In Toronto, resident Anna Lippman was in the area, known as Masafer Yatta on the West Bank. And while she was providing protective presence to Palestinians, Lippman, who was Jewish, was also attacked, though not as severely, by Israeli settlers, and also was not arrested. Lippman spoke afterwards to the online media, where she said, "What brings me back here is the people. Meeting the people here, the children, the elders, the activists, the mothers, all of them. Seeing the way that they continue to resist, not just writing articles, but sharing their story through their everyday acts of resistance. Continuing to be on their land, continuing their careers, their family lives, and the joy they find on their land and with their families, with their communities. It's so beautiful. The hospitality they gave me as a Jewish person whose taxes and identity are used to kill their cousins, they welcome me into their home and feed me, even though they have almost nothing." Today we are joined by Anna Lippman. She's a Toronto member of Independent Jewish Voices, has long been showing up in solidarity with Palestinian people in opposition to Israel's campaign of violence and displacement. And she opposes deeply, which we'll talk about today, the conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Now, she went to the West Bank to protect Palestinians and showed huge heart and courage in her time there. She is the daughter of a Holocaust surviving family and takes that into her heart as well when it comes to fighting and supporting the liberation of Palestinian people. And Anna, welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
So many places to start, but let me just begin, if you could just talk a bit about your time on the West Bank. A, was that the first time you'd been there? And B, how did that affect you? I mean, you went there already opposed the occupation, but I'm very curious how that affected you when you were there.
Yeah, so I'm actually currently in the West Bank.
At this moment?
At this moment, which is why my internet is so terrible. So I've been here for 2 months, and I'll be here for another month.
Huh.
It's actually my 4th time here doing protective presence work, really just, using both my international and my Jewish privilege to try to mitigate the violence and the ethnic cleansing. As a kid, I went to Israel a lot of times, but I had never been to the occupied Palestinian territories, the West Bank. And so going for my first time and seeing it, even though I had been doing this work for so long, it really made my resolve so much stronger, because the things that you see here, it's impossible to imagine. And, the relationships that you make with the people here, and then the violence that you witness upon them, it just breaks your heart.
So let me kind of jump into some of the things you just said, because I think it's important. Just for people listening to us today, where are you on the West Bank? Who are you staying with?
I am in the region of Masafer Yatta, the South Hebron Hills.
Yes.
And I'm in the village of Susia, most famous for being the home of Academy Award-winning director Hamdan Ballal.
So I assume then if you're there, you're staying with Palestinian families?
Yes. So they're hosting us in the village. They have basically a guest house in the middle of the village where we sleep, and where basically when we're not sleeping, children either are playing with us or people are coming to get us to respond to attacks,
And who is the we?
So I'm actually here with 7 other Jewish activists. Uh-huh. We're part of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. There's also several other non-Jewish activists, but, for myself and for the people in this group, it's really important for us to show up as Jews, right?
Right.
Because not really show the world what it means to oppose the state and Zionism, but also so many Palestinians here have never met a Jew that doesn't want to harm them, right? And so this in many ways is the, work of doing that kind of cultural exchange, right? And helping people understand that this is a terrible thing that is happening, but it doesn't represent all Jews, right?
Right. One thing you said, just to explore briefly for a moment together, about the pain and terror that Jews are in Israelis are foisting on Palestinians in this occupation and more. And I was reading about your work and who you are. The idea that Jews who suffered so much over thousands of years, who survived, and my family survived the Holocaust, the Cossack repressions in eastern Poland, the inquisitions that took place. I mean, everything that has happened to us as a people over the millennia, that we could then turn and do what we're doing in Israel.
Yes. I agree with you. And on the inside, I wonder the same way, especially like you, I'm the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. She was in Auschwitz. To understand the way that which happened before I was born impacts my life, I could never want to do this to someone else.
Right.
But, also it's the plain and sad truth that hurt people, right? And
right.
If Jews, we don't deal with our trauma, if we're able to let others kind of exploit it for their imperial goals, then of course we're seeing what's happening in Israel, right?
So I'm very curious what the response has been to you, first from the Israelis, but then the Palestinians. I mean, what has been your experience in what we might call Israel proper for the moment, in terms of what you experience when people know who you are and why you're there?
To be honest, I don't tell people within Israel proper like who I am and why I'm there.
I get it. Yeah.
I fear for my life,
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even, in the West Bank, we have to be a little careful who we talk to about what we're doing, because there are many ways that these names get back to the Israeli government, right? And so it's despicably easy for me to get away with this within Israel because I look very Ashkenazi. I look like everyone else.
Right.
No one looks at me and blinks twice, right? And that's why the Jews come to do this work, is because, we have these privileges and we might as well exploit them for something good, right?
So let's explore for a moment what that work is. When you say, we've said a number of times, you're there doing this work. Talk to people listening to us today about what this work is that you're doing.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're doing is documentation and accompaniment work. So especially in Masafer Yatta, most of the people here are farmers and shepherds. They very much rely on the land. And so a key way for them to be able to remain here is to be able to take their flocks out, is to be able to harvest their crops. And so we literally just accompany them on their shepherding shifts as they go to the grocery store, what have you, not only because Palestinians, Israelis, and internationals understand that you don't want to act the same towards Palestinians in private that you do in front of an international, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm getting this interview and Palestinians are not, right? So they don't want us to tell the world what they're doing to the Palestinians, what's happening. And this is what we do when we bring our privilege here, is we're able to share it back out.
Right. In the process of your work over there, what has been your interaction with Israelis, with Jewish Israelis, about what you're doing?
Yeah, it's been terrible. When the army comes, they give us, quite a hard time, despite us being Jewish. They call us anarchists. They say we were making chaos. A soldier told me the other day that I was here to make problems for the Jewish. And, the settlers themselves, they're even worse. The army will call us traitors, self-hating Jews, but the settlers will just yell all kinds of profanities at us. They'll chase us. I've been in multiple rock attacks.
What does that mean?
Like groups of young settlers coming to throw rocks at the villages, the Palestinians, basically a stoning, right?
In their minds, a biblical stoning.
Yes, of course.
I mean, the vast majority of settlers in the West Bank are right-wing extremist Orthodox Jews. Is that right?
Yeah. And the thing is that on the front lines of these more extremist settlements, are mostly young men, like 15 to 20-year-olds that are sometimes called the hilltop youth, who are taken from, bad homes off the street and brought to these settlements that are run by really right-wing fascist people that tell them, this is your land, you must protect it, you must, shepherd, and if you see Palestinians, attack them before they attack you. And so who we mostly see is teenage boys, right? And that makes it a difficult dynamic to hate them,
I understand. So let me take a step backwards here with you. So for just a minute, because this is literally, I've been involved in this and covering this my entire life almost. But what you're describing now, what you just said about Israeli boys on these settlements attacking you and Palestinians, were brought there, were in trouble, and brought to these. Talk a bit about that. Who are these kids? Where do they come from? What do you mean they were in trouble? It sounds like what, and I hate saying this, it sounds like what fascists did in Germany and Italy, taking youths off the street and turning them into stormtroopers.
Yes, exactly. And it's very similar here, right? Like sometimes it's rabbis, sometimes it's just agricultural entrepreneurs, and they'll go to places like Tel Aviv, like Jerusalem, like Beersheba, places within 48, and they'll tout their programs as helping at-risk youth and providing rehabilitation centers for at-risk youth. So these previously street youth are now productive members of society. They're learning how to farm. They're going to school. And actually, because they're touted this way, they get a lot of funding from places like the JNF that funds social service projects, from places like the Israeli government that funds rehabilitation for at-risk youth. But at the same time, there's enough of a distance that the Israeli government can blame these youth from an attack, and then through keeping an arm's distance to them, they're both supporting the youth to be there to do this ethnic cleansing, and they can blame the youth and say it's not part of the state. It's extra state actors,
So would it be fair to say, just to explore this just for a moment, we can go on something else, but it's fair to say that these kids that are taken to these settlements who are in trouble from the stuff they did in the streets are kids who are what we call Mizrahim, that there are kids who are from Arab African descent in Israel. Would that be about right?
Mostly not. Mostly they're Ashkenazi.
Ah.
I mean, sometimes they're Mizrahi, but the vast majority of them are Ashkenazi. A lot of them are from places like Europe and Ukraine. A lot of them are just, born and raised in Israel.
That's a pretty horrendous description. I think the world is not aware of what you're describing at this moment. I think most people, I wasn't, are not aware. And I stay on top of this. I mean, it's something that is it's a frightening Orwellian step.
It definitely is. And it's been happening for quite a while. And, not only is it terrible for the Palestinians, but it's so exploitative to these young men, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so I'm just also curious. I've not been to the West Bank, but as a young person, I was very young person. I was a freedom rider, and I was in Eastern Shore of Maryland, Mississippi, Alabama, and it was terrifying.
Yes.
But you did it because it had to be done.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about you in that regard. I mean, what it's like for you to live on the edge of that violence, protecting the human rights and liberation of Palestinians as a Jewish woman.
It's a lot. It's very scary, and it's not comfortable. I think a lot of times I feel like I'm on a 3-month firefighting shift. You can never really put your guard completely down because, things could go off at any minute and you'll have to run out of the house and go stop this fire, right? And it really impacts the activists here because it's a lot on your body, on your mind. And then, I see the Palestinians who live this every day. And I remember that I will go home to, Netflix and Uber Eats, and they will not. This is where they live, right? And so I think, just like you said, this is what has to be done, even though it's not my favorite thing to do, for sure.
All right. So I guess you've been aware of all the kind of crackdowns taking place in Canada, in Germany, across the globe against Palestinians.
Absolutely.
So, I'd just like to hear your kind of thoughts and analysis of what all that means, this kind of literally international crackdown. And it's going to begin to happen in larger ways here in the United States as well, with Donald Trump back in the White House.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, Canada is not that far off from Trump, right? We don't know who's going to win this next election.
Right.
And, Canada is going quite right itself. And I think one thing I've always learned about Palestine is it's sort of the moral center of the world, right? Everything that Israel does in Palestine, their militarization, their technology, their AI, they export it to the rest of the world. Police, army from all over the world go train with the IDF, right? And so to me, it's surprising to see the ways that this extreme crackdown is going global and is starting to impact people that, perhaps thought they were a bit more safe, right? And I think that's why everyone who feels strongly about this, who feels strongly about, the right to speak up for what you believe in, needs to be saying no, needs to be standing up, right? Because if we don't say this is too much, what student are they going to snatch off the streets next, right?
Right. And it sounds like what I've seen written before and what you're describing, people don't realize this kind of Western American and Israeli cooperation in testing out weaponry and more as a test run for oppression, universally.
Exactly. Yes. And Israel does it very well, right? And other imperial settler colonial countries like Canada, they pay attention. They want to do it well too.
So tell me a bit, for people listening to us in the time we have left, a bit about what your daily life and work is like there, what you're experiencing firsthand as a young Jewish woman in the West Bank living with Palestinians and staring down right-wing settlers and the Israeli army.
Yeah, I think what to me is most noticeable about my day-to-day experience here is it's so unpredictable that it's impossible to plan a month ahead and very difficult to plan 2 days ahead.
Wow.
We'll wake up, we'll go shepherding, we'll be having a lovely time, and then suddenly a settler will come in their truck, try to run us over, and we're taking footage of this, talking to lawyers, taking people to the police station to give testimony, and that's your whole day. And sometimes we can be very lucky and we'll just have a morning where things are great and we'll get to hang out with the families and just kind of chill. But even in those quiet times, there's still tension, right? Because it's so unpredictable that you never know what is coming or when. And every time that you continue to stay in your land, that you continue to, call settlers out, they seek revenge, right? So just kind of like the Palestinians here, I can't really give you a day-to-day because the settlers don't let us have that regularity and schedule.
What do you mean by that?
They keep us on our toes by intentionally being unpredictable, by telling us they'll come back tonight, then not, but coming to attack 3 days later. So it's just very hard.
As an activist in the midst of this, and more in the middle of it than most people are who might oppose what's happening because you're there, physically there, putting your life on the line, how do you see it unfolding in the future? And where are the possibilities that we can actually find a road to peace where Israeli and Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, and Jews live in that place together? In the end, for me, I have this poster on my wall. I've said this before in other shows. I have this poster on my wall that I got in Cuba in 1968. And it's a map of all of Palestine. And it has a Palestinian flag on one side and an Israeli flag on the other side. And it says, one state, two peoples, three faiths.
Right.
And that's kind of been my mantra for a long time. So I'm asking you that question in that spirit because It almost feels impossible to attain.
Yeah. Oh, I think that it has been really grim for the last 2 or so years, and it's been really difficult to find hope. I think where I find hope is the fact that so many more people know about Palestine than they did in 2014, than they did in 2021. And so for me, this gives me hope when I see just a random person that's not Jewish, that's not Arab, who knows about Palestine and cares about the injustice there. And, I think the more we speak up, the more we ask our governments to hold the Israeli government accountable, the more that we will find actual peace, right? But it's also important to recognize that peace, true peace, means equality, humanity, and dignity for everyone from the river to the sea, right? And so we cannot have a state, 2 states, 12 states, I don't care. But if Palestinians don't have the right to live in their land, to return to their ancestral land, to be as much of a society as an Israeli citizen is, there will never be peace, because peace is not built on oppression, right?
Right. And Lippman, a couple of things here. First of all, I do want to say this to you, and I want everybody listening to us here at The Real News to know it. What you and others like you are doing at this moment takes, in the Yiddish word is chutzpah, takes a lot of heart and strength and bravery to stand up for what you're doing. It's not just carrying a placard around an embassy. You're in the midst of it, saying, no, not in our name. This has to end. So I do want to thank you for what you're doing. I think your voices and the voices of others around you, along with Palestinians, is what we want to continue to hear more on this program. And for one, I want to stay in touch, and I want to help work to bring more voices like yours on, but also to expand those voices and give people the opportunity and chance to do exactly what you're doing.
Yes, I love that.
Because that will change it,
I think so. We got to have hope, right?
Yes, we do.
Connection.
Look, I'll say this one last thing, and I say this often. One of the scariest things for people in the South during civil rights was to see all the white freedom workers. And among those, the majority of the white people who put their lives on the line in civil rights were Jews.
Yes, this is our history, right?
Yes, right. So you're carrying on a tradition, and you're a brave human being, a brave woman. And let's do stay in touch, and whatever stories we can tell together about your experience and others' experiences and the experience of the Palestinian lives that you touch and live with, we want to put on the air and do that.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you so much for having me, and really for everything.
And please stay safe and stay strong. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you once again to Ann Lippman for joining us today. And I want to reiterate what I said during our conversation. The bravery she and other young Jews are showing in Israel-Palestine, living with Palestinians to say we as Jews say not in our name, is literally putting their lives on the line, just as people did to end racial segregation in America. I will continue to highlight their work, and we'll be hearing more from Ann Lippman and other Ann Lippmans as well, as the voices of the Palestinians they work with put their lives on the line, and they're there to stand with them. Once again, thank you to Ann Lippman for joining us today. Thanks to David Hebden for running the program today, our audio editor Alina Nelek, and producer Rosette Sawali for making it all work behind the scenes, and everyone here at The Real News for making this show possible. Please, let me know what you thought about what you heard today, what you'd like us to cover. Just write to me at mss@therealnews.com, and I'll get right back to you. Once again, thank you, Ann Lippman, for all the work you do and for joining us today. So for the crew here at The Real News, I'm Marc Steiner. Stay involved, keep listening, and take care.